G'day guys, John here, Chief Instructor with FPV Australia. Today I'd like to talk to you about heights and airspace. When flying a drone, we're always talking about staying under 400 feet and all that sort of stuff. But the plot gets a little bit thicker than the 400 feet thing, and I want to explain. So let's look at controlled airspace. As we know, around an airport there's a control zone and that's all controlled airspace, but then as we step away from that, that airspace starts to climb, right? However, that airspace given on all those maps, as all of our students learn in our courses, is given in above sea level data. So if you see a thing on a map that says controlled airspace, lower level of 3,500 feet, that's 3,500 feet above sea level. Let's have a look. Sutton, New South Wales. For those that live near Canberra, Sutton, New South Wales is just outside of the Canberra control zone. The lower level of controlled airspace above Sutton is 3,500 feet. As a drone pilot, you might think, that's great, I've got 3,500 feet between me and controlled airspace. But you'd be wrong. See the identifier here that tells us the elevation of Sutton? It's actually 2,800 feet above sea level already. That gives you a 700-foot buffer between the ground and controlled airspace. You put your drone at 400 feet, you've now enclosed that space down to 300 feet. Between you, your drone, and controlled airspace, not a lot of room. It gets worse. Let's look at Sunbury in Victoria. Sunbury in Victoria, the airspace above Sunbury in Victoria starts at a lower level of 1,500 feet. So again, the drone pilot thinks, great, controlled airspace doesn't start above my head until 1,500 feet up. But again, he'd be wrong, because Sunbury is already 1,400 feet above sea level. You put your drone at 400 feet, it's now inside controlled airspace. And see how that really just goes, wow. It even gets a little bit worse than that. So I want to talk to you about flying in the boonies. You're miles away from anything. Say, oh, I'm standing out in the middle of Goulburn somewhere. If you don't know where Goulburn is, it's between Sydney and Canberra. Have a look at it on the map. It's basically in the middle of nowhere. You're on the ground, you've got your drone out and you go, yeah, and you've got your radio on, and you hear pilots calling that they're at 3,000 feet, that they're at 3,500 feet. You go, oh, they're miles above my head. But again, you'd be wrong. If you hear a pilot call at Goulburn that he is, 3,000 feet, he's calling 3,000 feet above sea level. Goulburn, as my notes tell me, is already 2,100 feet up. He's only 900 feet above your head. So you call as a drone pilot, oh, I've got a drone up, not above 400 feet. Sounds good to you. Mr. Pilot hears that. He's now got to do some crazy calculations in his head and go, hang on, how high is Goulburn? That guy's 400 feet plus that. It's a bit crazy, right? It's a bit of a crazy system we're in. But you as the drone pilot must take responsibility of knowing your elevation and then add that to your drone height to know where it is in relation to the pilot who's just called 3,000 feet. Because in Goulburn, if you put a drone at 400 feet and a pilot calls 3,000 feet, you've only got about 500 feet between you. So let's think about that for a minute. I want you to, when you're flying your drones, think about the elevation that you're at where you're standing. Because the calls you are hearing are relative to sea level, not the ground you're standing on. And when you make a call to say, I'm not above 400 feet, you're making a call based on the ground you're standing on, not sea level. So there's a bit of a disconnect here, and we need to start to think about that heavily when we're flying our drones, especially when we're in country that might be far away from an airport, and you hear a call from a pilot saying he's at 3,500 feet. You think that's miles above your head, but not realising that you might be standing on ground that's already 2,500, maybe 2,700 feet up. All right, so if you're looking at those maps, those VNCs that we teach in our classroom, have a look. A lot of the elevations are put on it. You can find information about your elevation. Lots of apps will tell you exactly how far above sea level you are, and then you'll know what the calls being made above your head actually mean. So if you are flying a drone out there, please take note of all these little tricky things to keep on top of. We teach all of this in our drone school. And if you are flying a drone, as I say always, please do so responsibly. Safe skies for all. Enjoy.